Hey everybody, good morning. It's Anna J. Walner with the Author Library, and with me today, I am pleased to have author Gregory Phillips. Gregory, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Anna. So I'm Gregory Eric Phillips, and I just came out with my third novel earlier this year, A Season in Lights.
Oh,
And yeah, it's been very exciting. The novel takes place in New York City. I live in Seattle, Washington, but lived briefly in New York. So that gave the framework for this story.
right. Yeah. It takes us into the competitive world of ballet in New York. Do you have any personal experience in the theater or in dance to draw from?
I do, yes. I've been a dancer for many, many years, and primarily tango and salsa dancing myself. But I've dabbled in ballet and jazz dancing. And when I lived in New York City, I did dance in a few off-Broadway shows and have performed quite a bit on the West Coast as well. So yes, those experiences definitely impacted this story and inspired many of the events that happen in the book.
Wow, how cool is that? I've always had so much respect for classical toe ballet and being able to, watched, I live here in Houston. And so we have the theater district and I've seen the Nutcracker a few times, but I've never seen it on Broadway. And so I'm envious. That's so amazing. And that must have been quite the experience for to be able to see that.
It really
But
was.
the book is really amazing because it actually spans several decades through the 80s, or from the 80s to current day. And I mean, that's quite an undertaking. It makes for an exceptional love story that endures the test of time.
Yeah, I really like to play with different time periods in my books. I did something similar in my second novel, The Exile, which also has a flashback section to the 80s. Um, it, I feel like it just, rather than, a lot of stories will incorporate backstory kind of as you go. Um, I really like playing with these two different time periods because not only could it show New York City at two very different, distinct moments
Right.
of time, and New York City is really kind of a character in this novel in a way, but then it also shows the character who's in both sections, Tom, just shows how he develops as a man without having to really tell the reader. The reader can kind of sense what he's gone through in the interim years, even though we don't really talk about it much.
That's so awesome. Yeah, it is amazing to think of how we've come so far since the 80s, being an 80s kid myself. I'm
Mhm.
40 now. So, not 81. And I remember growing up in the 80s and how, and then the 90s and then the 2000s and how, technology just exploded and everything else. And we've come so far. So it's kind of a nice nostalgic part in the book to go back and read some of those things.
Yeah, yeah, and I also have written some historical fiction, and the 80s isn't really considered historical fiction yet,
Well,
but
yes.
pretty soon it will be. And like you said, there's some nostalgia for it for those who remember the time period, who maybe barely remember it since we were kids, right? But some of the people who've read this book who were actually working in New York in the 80s really enjoyed it because it did bring back a lot of memories for them.
That's amazing. So the underlying theme is the love between Cammy and Tom, but there are so many different layers over the course of decades as well. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that without giving away too much?
Absolutely. So I think the main theme of the novel is um, these characters working toward these ambitious goals in the theater arts and learning to appreciate where they land and what they come through, and those little moments that end up being some of the high points of their careers. And in many cases, they're not really realizing it until it's past. Because, in this book, unlike many other books or movies that surround the theater arts, it's not about people who make it big. It's about people who are just kind of struggling in the little back alley theaters to cobble together a career for themselves. And even though they're very ambitious, it's maybe not the life that any of them imagine for themselves, but in many cases, it's a pretty good life when you're doing what you love. So that's kind of one of the main themes that I wanted to portray in this book.
Gratitude, no matter what, just accepting
Absolutely.
blessings for what they are as they come, and enjoying the little things in life.
Yeah.
I think as authors, there's kind of a bit of a parallel there, because we do the same thing, celebrate the small successes as well as the big ones. So that's awesome. So yeah, you mentioned the Exile, which was released in 2019. It's truly an experience of transportation into the world of Colombia. It's had amazing reception. Is this a place you've always loved, or do you have some special ties or attachment to the country itself?
Great
How did
question.
you do the research?
So, as I mentioned, my main dance form is in the Latin dances, and so I feel a very strong bond with Latin America and with Latin American people, and I have many close friends from all parts of Latin America, but a few from Colombia as well. And so they were very helpful for me in research, checking the little bits of Spanish that I threw into the book, and just telling me what it was like to live in Colombia. And as I mentioned earlier with the backstory, the majority of the Exile takes place in present day Phoenix, Arizona. Not exactly present day, about 10 years ago.
Right.
But then it jumps back to the 80s and early 90s in Colombia, and how the two of the primary characters ended up coming from Colombia to the United States. And then the end of the novel, it takes them back to Colombia through circumstances. I won't give away more detail.
Right. Oh, wow. That sounds so amazing.
So yeah, it was really just a combination of, wanting to tell the story of the Latin American experience in the United States, because that's something that I think is an important story to tell. And Colombia, it definitely is a place that I've always wanted to visit. I've never been able to go there yet, but it's high on my list. But through, people I've known there, and I've just gotten a real strong love for the culture and the people and their history and everything.
That's amazing. With each of these stories, including Love of Finished Years, you incorporate actual events in history with a real sense of landscape to where the stories take place. So I'm curious, out of the three, it's like asking you to pick a favorite kid, but is there just one of them that holds a special place in your heart?
Well, you're right. They really all do. Right now, A Season in Lights, because it's the most recent, perhaps, but also it was definitely the most personal of the three, telling the dance story. So I think that it's the most special to me, because not only because it's the most recent, but because it was the most personal. But you're right that I do really like to bring historical and cultural events into the story. And even though technically Love of Finished Years is the only one of the three that would be considered historical fiction, in a way, I feel like I almost write historical fiction in a contemporary setting for the other two, because I do like to have those events of history, even if they're the ones we're living through at present, to impact the story, and that shapes the characters' lives. And so that was definitely true of both The Exile and A Season in Lights.
I just find it, I enjoy reading historical fiction. I know that I have so much respect for those who do because of the research process behind it and getting those, historical facts correct. But it's very enjoyable for me as a reader to experience that immersive kind of world that existed even back in the 80s, as you write it. So bravo on that. I mean, how do you do the research? Just internet or drawing on past? I know for the most recent one, drawing on past experiences.
Yeah. For me, research is kind of an organic process because I write about things that I'm interested in. And so it's things that probably I've maybe studied a little bit in the past or know people who've had some expertise in that area. And then I begin to draw on that as I craft a story. And then, of course, you need to do more detailed research, and the internet is great for that, or,
Right.
reading books on the subject, those sorts of things, especially say with the Exile, some of the actual events taking place in Colombia in the late 80s. I had to do a lot of research and read up a lot about, because I didn't know all the details. But again, it's areas that I'm interested in, and then that sort of makes it a very organic process.
Well, that's amazing. And I know that the most recent, can you show the cover for your newest release?
Sure.
Guys, this Season in Lights just released what was it? Just
April.
Just in April. So make sure to check that out. I have the link down in the description below. It is getting rave reviews, so it's definitely something that you want to check out. But I know that A Season in Lights, how is it to write from a very personal point of view? You almost feel like, do you see yourself in any one of the characters specifically, or is there your experience throughout the book?
Yeah, great question. I don't see myself specifically in a character. I try to avoid writing characters that are too close to me, because I feel like that's just, you can tell when authors are doing that, and I think it's sometimes not as effective. So I try to, even when a character has a similar experience to me, and I would say that Cammie's character is more closely, her experience of New York City more closely mirrors mine than, say, Tom's. But her personality, all the things about her is she's very different from me as a person, but her experiences then were portrayed much. I portrayed a lot of the things that I experienced when I was there. But it's more that, having been there, I felt the whole world of this off-Broadway experience, and tried to portray that more generally than a lot of the specifics of things that I actually did and saw.
Right, more of a feeling of just being there and being in that place at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I had an awesome time talking about it. Guys, definitely go check out the links in the description below to get more information on all of the books that you have available, and Gregory himself. So thank you so much again for being on the show. I had a fantastic time talking with you and getting to learn about Lights. And anyone who hasn't already, go ahead and make sure that you subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so that you're notified whenever new content is available. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Anna.
All right, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and have an awesome day.